Poverty is not a lack of money, it is a lack of power in the mind. Success is not earned, it is commanded by those who master their moods. You are not unhappy because life is hard. Life is hard because you permit unhappiness to rule you. Misery is a habit, so is joy. The man who waits for peace to feel peace has already surrendered. Circumstances do not shape you, they expose you. When the world turns cold, the weak shiver, the strong ignite from within. Your emotions are your soldiers, either they obey or they overthrow you. Train your mind to smile through storms, and you'll make storms obey your smile. This is not philosophy, this is survival. Command your mind, or be conquered by it. I tell you now, without hesitation or apology, poverty is a mental disease, and happiness is the cure. No man is poor who commands his thoughts, and no man is rich who surrenders them. The world has deceived you into believing that hardship is your jailer and fortune your liberator, but I say the opposite is true. Hardship awakens the strong, fortune seduces the weak. You are not beaten by life. You are beaten by the ideas you accept as truth. Misery does not come from events. It comes from the conclusions you draw about them. The poor man thinks the world owes him rescue. The wise man knows the mind owes him discipline. Indiscipline begins with the firm refusal to let circumstances govern the spirit. You may claim that life is unfair, and perhaps it is, but I tell you this, the laws of thought are exact, and they do not discriminate. They respond not to your needs, but to your definiteness, not to your past, but to your purpose. He who plants misery in the mind will harvest defeat. He who plants joy, deliberately, even in drought, will harvest riches of every kind. You are not born to beg from fate, but to issue commands to it. Happiness is not a reward, it is a tool, a weapon of endurance, a secret known by those who bend life to their will. Until you accept this truth, that the mind is your master key, you will wander from one disappointment to another, mistaking your reflection for reality. This is not a theory, this is law, and law does not feel pity. It only responds to alignment. So I ask you, have you, there exists no greater poison to personal power than the habit of helplessness, that subtle, silent narcotic called self. Pity, it does not strike like a storm. It seeps in like a fog. It clouds the judgment, dims the will, and silences the voice of definiteness within. It whispers not with truth, but with comfort, and comfort when earned is a reward. But comfort, when sought as an escape, is a cage. Self-pity is spiritual suicide dressed in emotional disguise. It is the voice that says, I tried, when in truth you merely wished. It is the inner retreat from the battlefield of persistence. It is the justification for staying down after life has knocked you over. Understand this, no man is defeated until he accepts defeat as permanent. The strongest chains are not made of iron, they are made of excuses and self. Pity is the factory from which they are forged. There is no accident in achievement. Wealth does not pity. Opportunity does not knock twice out of sympathy. The universe responds with precision to thoughts backed by belief and action. But the man who indulges in self-pity sends out a signal of surrender, and the world, cold as mathematics, responds with more loss, more rejection, more emptiness. I say to you now, self-pity is not a feeling, it is a habit. A learned response, a thought repeated so often it has become law in your subconscious, and all habits can be broken. But not by chance, only by force of will and a burning purpose. You say, but I've been hurt, life has been unfair. I do not deny your wound. But I challenge your decision to bleed forever. Pain is real, but suffering is a choice, and every moment you feed the habit of helplessness, you choose to remain a prisoner of circumstances rather than become a creator of outcomes. Think, what might you become if you placed as much energy into faith as you've placed into your frustration, if you fed your purpose as often as you fed your pity? Every great man, every builder of empires, dreamer of destinies, commander of fortunes, has been broken. But they refused to stay broken. Why? Because they understood that power lies in response, not in event, that the mind is not a mirror of reality, but a molder of it. The man who learns to speak to himself with victory, even in moments of defeat, becomes immune to the poison of pity. Do you believe in your desire? Then act like it. Faith is not silent. Purpose is not passive. If you truly believed that your destiny was greater than your history, you would stop weeping over spilled time and start commanding your days with clarity. Self-pity paralyzes the will. It tricks the mind into rehearsing failure and calling it reflection, but you cannot reflect and rise at the same time. The sun does not apologize for the darkness it burns away. Neither should you. Every time you indulge in that pitiful inner monologue, why me, why now, why this, you are handing the keys of your mind to fear, and fear is a terrible driver. It leads you in circles. It lets days blur into months, and months collapse into years, until you are no longer living, but merely enduring. Do you not see? You were not made to endure. You were made to expand. The moment you say, no more, and mean it, not emotionally but spiritually, you snap the spine of this habit. The moment you choose to respond, not react, to direct, not dwell, you reclaim the throne of your own mind. You are not helpless, you are untrained, but training begins the instant you reject the voice of pity and replace it with the voice of power. The most destructive lie ever whispered to the human spirit is not that you are weak, not that you are unworthy, but this: wait until you're ready. That subtle voice, disguised as wisdom, is in truth a parasite of progress. It feeds on hesitation, it thrives on the illusion of preparation, and it robs men not of opportunity, but of the will to seize it. Readiness is not a condition, it is a decision. The man who waits to feel ready is like a farmer who waits for a windless day to plant his seed. The season passes, the ground hardens, and still he waits, while another, less certain but more daring, has already planted, harvested, and moved on. Indecision is the silent partner of failure. It does not shout. It does not strike. It lingers. It wraps itself in logic. It cloaks itself in caution, but beneath that robe of reason is fear. The kind that refuses to admit its name. You tell yourself you are being patient, being careful, being methodical. But the truth is simpler and more dangerous. You are afraid to move forward without a guarantee. You forget that life issues no guarantees. It never has. It never will. The man who succeeds is not the man who waited for perfect timing. It is the man who dared to act in the face of uncertainty, who stepped out in faith, armed with purpose, even while the road ahead was covered in fog. Do not misunderstand me. I am not speaking against preparation. I am speaking against the worship of it. There is a line where preparation becomes procrastination in disguise, and many men live their entire lives towing that line, paralyzed by the delusion that one day they will wake up feeling ready. But readiness is not a spark that falls from the heavens. It is a fire you build with your own two hands. I tell you now, indecision is a killer of kings. It murders ambition not with bullets, but with silence. It does not steal your dream. It convinces you to delay it again and again until the dream withers and dies of neglect. Look around you. The graveyards are filled not only with bones, but with unwritten books, unsung songs, unstarted businesses, and unlived visions, all victims of the lie called someday. Faith is the antidote to indecision. Not blind faith, but intelligent, determined belief. The kind of faith that says, I do not need to see the whole staircase. I will climb anyway. The kind of faith that burns within the heart of a man who knows what he wants and moves toward it with persistence, even if his knees tremble. Your desire is not a decoration, it is a compass, but it cannot guide you if you refuse to walk. It is not your job to predict the future. It is your job to command yourself in the present. The mind must be trained to obey decision, not emotion. Because emotion is fleeting, desire can be distracted, but decision, firm, definite decision, builds bridges where others see chasms. Purpose demands action, and action does not wait on feelings, it creates them. The man who moves first feels last, because emotion follows motion. If you wait to feel confident before you begin, you will never begin. Confidence is not the starting line, it is the reward earned by those who begin without it. The truth is this: most people do not fail because they made the wrong move. They fail because they made no move at all. They stared at the door of destiny and waited for it to open itself, but destiny obeys action. It does not answer to hesitation, it does not respond to maybe, it only recognizes the language of definiteness. So I ask you now, not as you are, but as the person you could become, how long will you let indecision govern your fate? How many more days will you wait to feel what only action can produce? There is an enemy that follows you silently, not in the streets, not in the shadows, but within your very thoughts. It does not carry a weapon. It does not raise its voice, it whispers, and its greatest trick is this: it sounds exactly like you. That enemy is fear, but not the kind of fear that protects. I speak not of instinct nor the reflex to survive. I speak of the impostor, the masquerader, the fear that poses as reason, poses as wisdom, poses as being realistic. The fear that talks like you, thinks like you, but does not serve you. This is the liar that has kept kings in cages and built empires out of excuses. Fear is not your protector, it is your prison warden. It says, wait until you're sure. It says, what if you fail? It says, what will they think? But I say, what if you listened to that voice your entire life and only realized at the end that it wasn't yours? The mind, if left undisciplined, becomes a factory for fear. It takes your desire and coats it with doubt. It takes your vision and covers it in fog. But remember this: the mind will believe whatever it hears most often, especially if the voice sounds familiar. Fear takes root not because it is strong, but because it is rehearsed. You have repeated its lines so many times it now echoes without being questioned, but repetition does not equal truth. You can chant a lie until it feels like law, but it remains a lie. And the greatest lie fear tells is this: this is who you are. No, that is not who you are. That is who you have agreed to be, and agreements can be broken. The voice of fear thrives on passivity. It grows louder each time you obey it. Each time you retreat, each time you delay, but it shrinks the moment you challenge it. The moment you stand and say, not today. The moment you move toward the thing that terrifies you, because fear cannot survive motion. It feeds on stillness, it devours hesitation, but it flees from definiteness. A single act of boldness cuts through 10,000 anxious thoughts, not because the act is grand, but because the act is proof that fear does not hold dominion. Faith is the only force powerful enough to silence fear. Not blind hope, not shallow positivity, but deep-rooted, iron-willed, purpose-driven faith, the kind of faith that is not dependent on feeling. The kind of faith that speaks like thunder into the storm of doubt and says, I will persist until I succeed. The man of desire must train his thoughts as a soldier trains his reflexes. He must detect fear in its earliest disguise. He must confront the voice that says, be careful, and respond, be courageous. He must see fear not as a stop sign, but as a signal, a marker that he is moving in the direction of growth. Do you not yet see? The moment fear appears is the moment faith is required, and it is also the moment that power becomes available. The door does not open before fear it opens through it. The thing you are afraid to do is the very thing that will break the spell of mediocrity over your life. You say you want change, but do you want it enough to walk through the fire of uncertainty? Because that is the price, and fear will always scream just before the breakthrough. It knows it is about to lose control. But the man who walks anyway, who moves in defiance of the voice, discovers the truth. Fear was never the enemy, believing it was. There are men who pray for freedom while gripping their own chains, men who curse their suffering yet clutch it like a relic. They speak of wanting change, but beneath their words lies a quiet truth. They have become addicted to misery, yes, addicted, for misery, like any drug, offers its comforts. It demands no courage. It requires no decision. It asks nothing but your surrender. Misery removes the burden of trying. It gives a man the luxury of blaming circumstances instead of confronting his own reflection. And so, many choose it, not consciously, but habitually. They nurse their wounds. They polish their complaints. They rehearse their failures as if to preserve them. Why? Because suffering absolves responsibility. It is easier to remain in pain than to rise and risk again. Misery becomes a mask for fear, fear of greatness, fear of rejection, fear of being seen striving and falling short. The most tragic prison is the one with an open door, and many men sit in that cell, building reasons not to leave. You must understand, suffering is not always forced upon a man. More often it is selected, like a familiar coat, worn because it fits his story, the story of I've been hurt, the story of life never gave me a chance, the story of it's too late now. These are not facts. These are excuses dressed as truth, repeated until they harden into identity. The mind will cling to what it rehearses. If you rehearse loss, you begin to expect it. If you rehearse misery, you begin to crave it, not because you enjoy pain, but because it feels like home. And a man will always return to what feels familiar, even if it is killing him. Faith is the antidote to familiarity. Faith does not depend on how you feel. Faith moves in spite of feeling. Faith burns through self, pity with the fire of purpose. The man of faith says, I am not my pain, I am not my past, I am not my excuses. He speaks this until it becomes law within his subconscious. Desire must be greater than comfort, for misery is a sedative and desire is a flame. The man must be set ablaze by purpose to escape the gravity of his own story, and purpose, once discovered, demands a new identity, one that misery cannot occupy. You cannot carry suffering and success in the same mind. One will always crush the other. There are those who wear their suffering like a badge. They believe it grants them depth, makes them noble, earns them sympathy. But sympathy is a cheap currency for the man who was born for greatness. Greatness requires persistence, not pity, vision, not victimhood, action, not avoidance. When you choose misery, yes, choose, you deny yourself the very power that could have freed you. You become the architect of your own decline. You spin tales of betrayal, of injustice, of defeat. But in truth, your greatest betrayer is the voice that convinced you to stay down. The universe does not punish you, it mirrors you. And if you radiate pain long enough, the world responds with more pain, not because it hates you, but because you have tuned yourself to receive it. Misery is not a measure of truth. It is a measure of distance from purpose. And every moment you dwell in it, you drift farther from the man you were designed to become. The time will come, and it always does, when your suffering no longer looks like struggle, but like indulgence. And the world will stop listening, not because it is cruel, but because even nature refuses to reward what refuses to evolve. So I ask you, in the stillness of your mind, is your pain your past, or has it become your identity? And if so, who would you be without it? Most men believe joy is a gift, something granted when the world cooperates. They wait for it, they pray for it, they believe it arrives with success, with comfort, with applause. But the truth, cold and absolute, is this: joy is not a reward, it is a responsibility, and the man who learns to summon it, regardless of condition, possesses a power this world cannot break. Joy is a discipline. It is forged in the furnace of decision. It is chosen, not stumbled upon. It is the quiet revolt of the man who refuses to let circumstance dictate his state of mind, and because so few choose it, so few master it, joy remains the most underestimated force in all of human achievement. Weak men wear their moods like weather. They rise when the sun shines and collapse when it rains. But unbreakable men, those who build empires, who shape history, who walk unshaken through chaos, do not wait for the sun. They become it. You may ask, how can I be joyful when life is difficult? But that question reveals the very trap. You have linked joy to ease, and as a result, you have made your emotions hostage to things beyond your control. You have become reactive, not responsible, and no reactive man can lead. No reactive man can command his destiny. The mind must be trained to obey the will. That is the cornerstone of all power, and joy is the first proof of that mastery. The man who commands his state, who decides to smile in the furnace, to rise in the storm, to give thanks while still bleeding, is the man who cannot be conquered, because his power does not come from outside. It is rooted in choice, fed by purpose, anchored in belief. Joy, when practiced daily, becomes a weapon, not a soft sentiment, but a steel edge that cuts through fear, fatigue, and failure. It rewires the subconscious. It reprograms expectation. It lifts the spirit into alignment with faith. And once a man's faith and emotion agree, his power becomes limitless. But this practice requires persistence. It is not for the casual seeker. It demands vigilance over one's thoughts, discipline in one's speech, and radical accountability for one's emotional state. The man who masters joy must guard it like treasure, because every force of mediocrity will try to steal it, through criticism, through delay, through the whispers of doubt that slither in when you're tired and alone. Still, the unbreakable man persists. He sees joy not as a feeling to be chased, but a frequency to be tuned into by force of will, not force of luck. He does not wait for external change to feel internal power. He feels power, and the world bends accordingly. Desire gives him direction. Purpose gives him fuel. Joy gives him resilience, and resilience is the rarest currency in this age of anxiety. Men fall not from lack of talent, but from lack of emotional stamina. They crumble at the first sign of resistance, not because they are weak, but because they have not trained themselves to remain centered amidst the chaos. They have confused joy with comfort, when in fact, joy is what gives you strength to endure discomfort without surrender. Joy turns pain into proof. It transforms rejection into refinement. It laughs not out of denial, but out of defiance. It is the soul saying, "You will not break me, for I have already decided how I will feel." This is not philosophy. This is law. The man who disciplines himself to feel joy while the battle still rages, who lifts his own spirits when all else falls, becomes untouchable, because his state is no longer at the mercy of conditions. His mind is no longer available to fear. And what can stop the man who refuses to be moved internally, no matter what shakes around him externally? What obstacle can outlast the man who feeds his fire from within? What force can defeat a man who has mastered the mood of victory before the victory itself arrives? That man becomes the rarest of all, unbreakable.